So now we're on to the second part of section 3, and this is where we have the corners, the 4 corner squares that are going to fit into the spaces left when we made the colourful stripes. Now these are slightly different, of course. You've made these, followed the pattern, and they are a little different from the centre bauble squares. The baubles themselves are exactly the same, but we've gone for a different colour for the background in when you've been squaring off the circle, and we've actually added another round. Now what we did with the second round of the well, I suppose that must be round 8 of the square, was to make it in half treble stitches rather than the trebles. So that's the second round of the bluebell stitch here is in half treble stitches. And then we've got the final round, in the bottle green, also in half trebles. So you've got 3 rounds after the bauble itself this time. This is just to make it fit exactly into the space on the corners. And we've turned, the second round was turned so it's on its wrong side, and the final round is right side up. Now there are 2 different colours for the backgrounds. As you can see, this one is done in bluebell and the other one is done in apple green, I think. So we're going to have 2 squares each done in apple green and 2 in bluebell, and they're going to appear diagonally across from each other in the corners. Now you can use the pattern, there's a diagram in the pattern that shows you where to put each one. So we'll get started now. But first there's the small task of sewing in these ends, if you haven't already done it, on the colourful stripes. You can see these ones, this side has got all the tails still lying, whereas the other side is nice and tidy. You can see that, it's a nice straight edge and everything has been finished off on this side, but I've still got this one to do now. We're on the front of the blanket, so we want to pull these ends through to the reverse side. So just put your hook in from the back, grab the end and pull it through. You'll see that the coloured stripes do stop a fraction before the end of the row, but that's fine because that will make it easier when you're coming to stitch in or to crochet in the squares. So we pull them all through to the back and then just thread each one onto your needle and let's see, that's it. Yeah, sew them in quite neatly along the row a bit and back, and then cut it short. And then all 4 sides have all the ends dealt with. Nice and tidy, as you can see, and nice straight edges to join the squares to, which is what's coming up next. So we take our square and we have to make sure that we get it in position. Make sure that it's the right way up, that your hanger is the same way up as all the other hangers, that your blanket is on the front, and you'll be joining with your square on the front as well. I've just checked to make sure that my hanger is in the right place compared to the rest, and this bluebell one is in one corner. The other bluebell will be in the opposite corner below. So we'll move on and start joining one of the squares. Now I've actually chosen the orange bauble to join because it fits, the blanket fits better under the frame of my camera. But all 4 squares will be joined in exactly the same way. Now, first of all, we have to make sure that the hanger is on the front, and you can't see it, but out of camera I've checked that I'm on the front of the blanket. All the other baubles are the same way up with the hangers on the front. And as like I said before, this one and the one that's diagonally opposite will be the apple green, and the other two will be the bluebell ones. Now I have swung my square round so that I know I've got one side that I want to make with the half treble stitch first before I get to the point where I'm at the corner of the blanket. I'm using the double denim again and half treble stitch. Excuse that tractor that's just passed. I do live on a farm. So I'm working with 3 half trebles in each space along the first side of the square, which is just what you've done before when you've been joining the squares. I did check that my square was the right way up. The hanger was going to end up in the same position as all the other hangers in the baubles, so everything's fine. I'll just keep going on this side. I'll go as fast as I can because you know exactly how this works so far. And we'll get to the end of the square. So that is half trebles against the dark green half trebles. This little extra round of dark green just makes the square fit better into the shape, as I've said before. So we're just about onto the corner. And I've got to do half of my corner with the 3 half trebles. There we go. And now you can swing it round and you can see that it's matching up to the corner of the blanket. I'll probably just swing this round, and it's not easy. It doesn't like being manipulated underneath this frame. Take a minute or two just to get it into position because there we go. I'll probably move it along a bit in a minute, but I can get my square back into position. I think that's about the best I can do. Right, now I'll lay my square down so it's lining up with the corner, and we're going to work along that side into the corner of the blanket and then down the other side. Now, it's exactly the same way. We're just slip stitching into the blanket and then half treble 3 into the square. But you have to look for the places where you can put your hook. They aren't obvious. It's not like any of the other parts that you've done. You've got the stripes, and the stripes help to balance it out. You can get an idea of where you want to put your slip stitch because the stripes help to let you see. They do tend to run quite close to the half trebles in the square so that you can match them up reasonably well. Let's start with the first corner. So we've done our first three half trebles, and we've slip stitched into the corner of the blanket and back into the square to complete that corner. Now just go straight up from where you are and into the first space that you come across in the blanket, slip stitch, and then back down to the square to put in 3 half trebles. Back up and just have a look. That looks like it would be a good point to put your slip stitch into, and then 3 half trebles. And you can see how it's sitting quite flat. There we go. Another space, slip stitch, and 3 half trebles. It's not the end of the world if you get to the end of this side and decide that it hasn't fitted in particularly neatly. You can just pull it back and try again. You're aiming for it to lie flat. You don't want it bunching up in the center corner, so just keep an eye on the number of slip stitches you're doing as you're doing your half trebles. I'm going in, make another slip stitch, and I just keep going along the side with the 3 half trebles. You can lay your square and just use it as a guide where to put your slip stitch. And we're coming up to almost at the corner. You can see that it's fitting quite neatly in there. Quite happy with the way that's lying. There's another couple of slip stitches before we reach the corner. So last slip stitch just fits in there, and then we're on the corner. 1, 2, 3. And for this, all I'm going to do is look for that dark green corner there, and I'm going to, so that's the corner, the original corner of the blanket before we put these stripes in, and I'm going into that corner and make a slip stitch. And then I can swing this all around, and we're ready to go down the other side. And that's exactly the same way. You've got to try and line it up so that it's going to fit in neatly at the outside edge. And there we go. I've worked my way down in exactly the same way, and I'm now at the bottom edge. Everything is lying nice and flat. I've done my last slip stitch, and it's time to start to make the corner of the square. 1, 2, 3. And then well, it wasn't the last. I've got the last slip stitch to put into the corner of the stripes, and then I can slip everything round to do the final edge. There we are. Now the fourth edge was worked in exactly the same way. When I got to the corner, it was just finishing off that very first corner and slip stitching. And there we have it. You've got your square in position, and it's lying nice and flat, and you've got 3 more that you have to do in exactly the same way. Just check everything is smooth, and that is it.